Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of Alien Addict, where we discuss all things UFOs and aliens and indulge into the mysteries of the unexplained. My name is Nick, and welcome on in. If you could be so kind, and please like and subscribe, it'll help the channel out. That would be much appreciated. So, let's get on with the show. So, if you're wondering where Ollie, Lee, and Dave are, get your asses over to Spotify, to the Daily Conspiracy Podcast, where you get to listen to them 5 days a week, talking all things conspiracies and keeping you in the loop. So this episode was released today on the 18th of February 2025. And Lee and Ollie were talking about NewsNation and the speculation of where NewsNation come from. And this has always been clocked in my mind. And I think we need to be very wary of what information, when it comes to UFOs, where is it coming from, and whether or not the conversation is going in the right direction. But I'm going to get to that in a moment. But listen to what Lee and Ollie has to say about NewsNation.
Right, plot twist. It's all bullshit, and it's just NewsNation making more alien adjacent news stories, which appears to be the bread and butter of NewsNation.
NewsNation seemed to appear from nowhere when the UFO stuff was hot.
I have so many questions about NewsNation. So, like they just
don't get me wrong. I'm glad they're about, because
are you?
Yeah, it's something.
I mean, it's good. It's good for
they give us content.
Yeah, right. That's fine. Yeah, content's good. Do you trust it?
I'd like to go to a barbecue with Ross Coulthard.
I'd like to go to a barbecue with Ross Coulthard as well. Do you trust it?
I think he'd make a great burger.
No, do you trust it as in what NewsNation are feeding us?
Oh, absolutely not. Because it's a news channel, you know.
Well, it's a news channel. I go back to them employing Chris Cuomo. He is not going to be a cheap hire.
No.
And yeah, it's a strange old one.
And arguably, have you seen some of the views they get are just not great, and I just don't know how. I think to myself, how the fuck are they getting money?
I mean, I take it there is a NewsNation channel. I don't know. So there's probably some sort of bad revenue coming in that way. But yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. 100%. Like in a world where, because they are very much a classic news channel, although they do lean maybe more into the online thing, so that's probably making them slightly more. But they're much more mainstream media than independent media, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So in a world where mainstream media is struggling, for them to be like thriving, or at least from the outside thriving, there's something fishy about it, and it does seem to be the UFO story. And don't forget, it's not just that they did it's not just the Ross Coulthard stuff. They dropped the fucking Las Vegas aliens. They dropped the fucking Miami Mall alien story.
That's a very, very good point. The fact that where did NewsNation come from? It came out not long after, I believe, the 2017 newspaper article from the New York Times in regards of the Pentagon admitting to the UFOs of actually being real. But what I've started to notice as I'm paying attention to NewsNation for the past, 5 years, since they really started, they are really pushing this UFO narrative. They really have been. And I mean, in a way, these stories, if we take out this story, for instance, they really were peddling the drones. For instance, this footage here where you can see the blue flashing lights. I believe that was debunked by Stephen Greenstreet, who actually contacted the pilot. And I'm agreeing with what Ollie and Lee are saying in terms of, do you trust them? In my personal opinion, no, I don't. Do I trust Ross Coulthard? No, I don't. Unfortunately, it does have a smug look on his face, no offense. But this footage here, that was proven to be a plane. They really were pushing the threat narrative, especially that UFO channels were portraying at the time. And NewsNation played a massive part in hyping up the drone story and speculating what they are. And like me and you who are interested into UFOs, we will look at NewsNation because they're the only news outlet so far that are really pushing the UFO narrative. but is the conversation going in the right direction? I mean, it's up to you whether or not you trust Jake Barbara's story. If you believe in Lou Elizondo's stories, I mean, there's so many different avenues that people are going down. And it's making me think at this point, is NewsNation put there to put the conversation in a different direction? Going back to my last live stream I did on Alien Addict, I was talking about this interview. And I showed this interview with Mike Benz on the Sean Ryan show. And he was talking about very briefly about there are institutions, especially from the three-letter agencies, are really implanted these agents to really push the direction, especially the conversation on UFOs, in my opinion, especially conspiracy theories. I believe they've been implanted to push the conversation in different directions. And I talked in great detail about that on the live stream I did on Alien Addict. Should we be very careful of what NewsNation is putting out in terms of UFOs and the transparency of UFOs? Absolutely. I think we need to be very, very careful, because I know Ross Coulthard and NewsNation is get a lot of crap for this. And it was this that they released in terms of this ball of light, which I know the debunkers have been screaming on Twitter or X, saying that these are just bugs. And I've talked about that in the last episode, that I don't really think they are. Most probably in some cases, for sure. Now, understandably, the people in the UFO community are very skeptical on what this could possibly be. I do believe that these balls of light could be something spiritual. That's just my opinion from me looking into it. In terms of this rod that we see here, I've done a video again on Alien Addict on rods, and I do believe there's some sort of prehistoric creature. That's just my personal opinion, that our eyes cannot see, but the camera can capture it. I remember that the History Channel did do a debunk on it, and again, I should mention in the last episode that it didn't look nothing like this rod effect. In fact, it was a moth that they filmed, and it didn't look nothing like it. So that's just my personal opinion on that one. I know NewsNation does get a lot of crap, but we should be very, very skeptical. And I would agree with Lee and Olli on this one, is that where did it come from out of such a short period of time, and why they push in the UFO narrative, pushing all the stories. And like Lee saying, they were literally pushing Miami more aliens, the crazy lady on the plane. So is that conversation going in the right direction for ufology in terms of transparency? Just think about that for the moment. And obviously Lou Elizondo and the people in the UFO fan club that go with it. Just saying. But one last time, go check out the Daily Conspiracy Podcast, where you can find Ollie, Lee, and Dave going 5 days a week talking about conspiracies. And I tell you what, it's a great laugh, and I definitely would recommend it. And please give them a comment and give them 5 stars, because they very much deserve it. Right, let's move on. Now we're back on next, where Jay Anderson from the Project Unity put out quite an interesting video. So this is Eric, who was a whistleblower who testified to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and ARROW, which is the All Domain Anomaly Revolution Office, regards of potential direct energy weapons in Antarctica. Calls out UFO narrative control. Very interesting. Let's pay attention to what he has to say.
That disclosure is a sham. It's a total sham. It's a completely controlled narrative. They set up an agent on one side and call it a margin. They set up an agent on the other side. It's a different margin. As long as they can get everybody to discuss the bullshit between those two margins, they have effectively controlled the conversation. It's the people discussing outside of the margins that will immediately be attacked and not allowed to have their information ever inserted between the margins for the consideration of the masses. It is so obvious, it's ridiculous at this point. Lou Elizondo is self-titled the Czar of Torture. Like, to me, that sounds like something like an SS officer would be in a concentration camp. And we wouldn't think good of this person. But here we have a guy that's literally doing the exact same activity, but with a different uniform on, so he gets a pass. Now all of a sudden he's not a horrible human being like a Nazi, but now we're also supposed to trust that this person is somehow changed their ways. He was a counterintelligence guy by definition. He was a torturer by definition. So this is a human being that will compromise his morals to a level most people never would. So now people go, he wouldn't be doing that now. He wouldn't be compromising his morals for money today. I think what they're asking him to do for money right now is probably the easiest thing for him to do ever. And they're probably offering him more money now to do this than he was getting for cutting people's fingers off in Guantanamo Bay.
Remember, I was talking about the infiltration of information, where you get these people from the three-letter agencies who are put into the community to steer the conversation in a different direction. This is what I've always been saying. Is the conversation going in the right direction? And clearly, obviously, it has not been. This is what I mean. We need to be very careful on what information we're consuming. As the UFO community, I've noticed we are relying on the bullshit. Pretty much, I'm sorry to say this, but NewsNation, I think, is a big part of that. And this guy, Eric Heckler, made such a good point, and even he sees the bullshit behind it. And it's a very clear, obvious sign that disclosure isn't going to happen. Is it some sort of psyop? I mean, the three-layer agencies, whoever you really trust, I mean, I don't really trust any of them, don't want this information coming out. This is why Anna Paluna Luna, she was making a new task force. She was given permission to have the task force to be set up to release this information on JFK, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, 9/11, COVID, and the things that go with it. But especially the UFO narrative, which has been shut down, beaten down for at least over 80 years. All of a sudden, because we have a new presidency, President Trump, we have a new administration, is he going to be giving us the right information, the transparency that we're looking for? I personally don't think that's going to happen because we can't get an answer on the drone situation. So we're just like running around like headless chickens. I mean, we could talk about disclosure until we're blue in the face, but at this moment, I think it's more or less dead in the water. And this narrative is still going to be pushed. It's still going to be, the conversation is going to be split up. I mean, look at the community alone. We're all fighting with each other because we've got different opinions on something that might be fake. We're talking about aliens here. Where's the evidence? Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying, not denying aliens, but we really need the evidence at this point. So Eric Heckler make a very good point. And what I was talking about in the previous episode about people in the three-letter agencies putting these people out there to steer the conversation in a different direction. And that is worth pointing out. Seems to be the theme of this episode, isn't it? Last but not least, we're back onto the Daily Conspiracy Podcast because they were talking about a potential asteroid that is going to hit Earth in 2032, I believe. However, this kind of reminds me of this threat narrative. There's always a threat. There's always something got to be scared about. And the chances of this asteroid actually hitting Earth, according to the interviews I've been listening to, and I strongly recommend going to the Daily Conspiracy Podcast because the boys do talk in depth on that. And this is space rockets, asteroids, and Armageddon on the Daily Conspiracy Podcast. Go check them out. Honestly, definitely recommend it. And what Olli and Lee were talking about, that the percentage of it actually hitting Earth, it seems to be going up. Now, we've got a fair few years to go until this asteroid could potentially hit Earth. But in my opinion, I think this might be a build-up to the asteroid threat before the fake alien invasion. And it just reminded me, boom, straight away, of Carol Rosin. If you've been in the conspiracy realm of the alternative movement, you've most probably seen this clip. Now, this is from Dr. Carol Rosin, who's speaking at the Disclosure Project in 2001. And she mentioned that she had an encounter with Dr. Werner von Braun in terms of what would be the last card, so to speak. So let's play this clip because it's very, very interesting what may potentially happen in the near future.
Good morning. My name is Carol Rosin. In 1974, after being a sixth grade school teacher, I was introduced to the late Dr. Werner von Braun in the U.S., the father of rocketry. In my first meeting with him during that first 3.5 hours, he said to me, Carol, you will stop the weaponization of space. And I said, teachers don't stop until June. He said, no, you have to understand. This is February. And we have to prevent the weaponization of space because there is a lie being told to everyone that the weaponization of space is now first being based upon the evil empire, the Russians. There are many enemies, he said, against whom we're going to build this space-based weapon system, the first of whom was the Russians, which was existing at that time. Then there would be terrorists. Then there would be third world countries. Now we call them rogue nations or nations of concern. Then there would be asteroids. And then he would repeat to me over and over, and the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat.
Look where we are at the moment. Let's just go back in time. Let's just have a little listen to what she had to say.
And we have to prevent the weaponization of space because there is a lie being told to everyone that the weaponization of space is now first being based upon the evil empire, the Russians. There are many enemies, he said, against whom we're going to build this space-based weapon system. The first of whom was the Russians, which was existing at that time.
I remember Ronald Reagan talking about the threat of an extraterrestrial presence. I believe he mentioned that several times during his presidency. I remember Ronald Reagan talking about a Star Wars project, which was these space-based weapon systems that Carl Rosin was talking about. And that was back in the 80s. So you can see we've got like a timeline going on here.
Then there would be terrorists. Then there would
Terrorists. Okay, we're moving forward. That would also be 9/11.
be third world countries. Now we call them rogue nations or nations of concern.
I mean, one could say that would be Iraq. One could say that there'd be Libya. There's been Syria. There's a multitude of like wars been going on between now and 9/11, or the war in Iraq.
Then there would be asteroids.
Boom, the asteroids. Okay, have we got to the asteroid threat yet? I don't think we have. I've been hearing a lot, especially from like dark journalists, that the asteroid threat has already been done and dusted. I don't think it has. I think it's still on the cards, and this 2032, I think, might push that agenda, possibly to actually say, oh no, we need a threat now, or the wars are more or less, I won't say the war's going to be over because we're always going to have wars, but I think they're always pushing a threat narrative. I mean, just look at the medical intervention that happened 4 years ago.
And then he would repeat to me over and over. And the last card, the last card, the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat.
Project Bluebeam. And that's where the fake alien invasion comes in. So when I keep on hearing fake alien invasion is going to happen this year, I don't think so. If we're going what Carol Rosin is saying, we've got a timeline here, and she seems to be quite accurate so far. I reckon the fake alien invasion, if one did happen, Project Bluebeam style, would happen most likely 10 years from now. That's just my personal opinion on that. But again, time will tell, ladies and gentlemen. Time will tell. It's very, very interesting times we're living in 2025. It seems to be like a dramatic change vibrationally. I mean, especially like even like politically as well. As we're all going through this crazy time, there is definitely something in the air that something might happen. Again, I'm not really pushing the idea that something bad's necessarily going to happen, but I would say there is some sort of shift that's happening. And whether or not a big event will happen, I don't know. We're 2 months into January and everything's gone absolutely crazy. So time will tell. But again, not pushing the horrible narrative and not really pushing the fear mongering, because we need more positivity in this world. So last but not least for today, my mum sent me this. She goes, oh, could you remember the Fukushima disaster that happened in 2011? I said, oh, I remember that very, very clearly, because I remember Alex Jones was talking about it quite prominently, about the radiation being leaked out, as obviously we had the earthquake and the subsequent tsunami that hit the nuclear power plant, which caused one of the reactors to explode, and all this radiation started pouring out. But what people didn't realize is that there were UFOs spotted, balls of light were spotted, so to speak, over the facility after the event happened. I'm going to show this here. Look at this. Unfortunately, it's really crappy quality, but you can see all these dancing lights. And this was over the reactor as well. Not only that, but there's another one as well. And this was spotted at night. Check this out. I can't see any flashing beacons, any navigation lights on this. Oh, that's brilliant. We're finishing the video with some CGI aliens. Fantastic. So if you like what you see, please like and subscribe. Be much appreciated. And I'll be back in a few days with the latest updates and news information in regards to UFOs and aliens, the paranormal, and some strange events that's been going around the world as well. So until next time, always remember, they're watching you, watching us, watching them. See you soon.